Hello and welcome to our People to People Group 2025 Accounting and Finance Market Update and 2025 Priorities. I'm Bianca Luck, New South Wales Director and Temporary Contract Manager here in Sydney, New South Wales at People to People. On today's show, we will be exploring what key trends are impacting the accounting and finance landscape in 2025. We will be joined today by Leanne Allen, an experienced Chief Financial Officer in the property sector, and Chris Yam, Acting General Manager and CFO at St Vincent's de Paul Society, Queensland, to unpack the key trends shaping the accounting and finance landscape across Australia and New Zealand in 2025. Where is demand highest in accounting and finance? How are accounting leaders navigating today's biggest challenges? What do accountants need to do to stay relevant in 2025? And what trends will define accounting and finance by 2030? But first, let's kick things off with a look at what's really happening in the accounting and finance recruitment market right now. 2024 was a tough year for recruitment across many sectors, especially accounting and finance, with qualified accountants being the hardest to find. As we move into 2025, employers are under pressure to move fast and offer more than just a paycheck to attract talent. High demand roles include transactional finance, payroll, systems accountants, data analytics specialists as well. Over half of accounting teams feel under-resourced, highlighting the continued talent gap. To stay competitive this year, 75% of organisations are prioritising automation and system improvement. There's also a strong push towards upskilling existing teams, and 45% are investing in staff development through training and certifications. Compliance and cash flow management are also major focus areas as businesses aim to navigate a changing environment. Interestingly so, while many teams plan to stay onshore, more than half still rely on external financial partners for support. The temp and contract market in accounting and finance industry continues to perform strongly. Demand is being fueled by project work, payroll system implementations, upgrades, financial reporting, and the ongoing need for business as usual, BAU, across accounts payable, receivable, and general ledger roles. AI hasn't made a major impact just yet, with 58% of respondents saying it hasn't affected their work. But for those starting to adopt it, like areas like accounts payable and financial reporting, we're seeing early signs of change. All this points to a very highly competitive recruitment landscape in Australia and New Zealand, where companies must be proactive, whether it be investing in their people, upgrading systems, or making a smarter use of AI. The demand is there, but standing out as an employer of choice requires more than just strategic effort than ever before. Looking ahead, the accounting and finance talent market shows no signs of easing, with ongoing skill shortages, rising expectations from candidates, and new technologies slowly reshaping. The pressure is on employers to adapt. All the insights we've just shared and the conversations we've just about to have are drawn directly from our 2025 Employment and Salary Trends Report. This comprehensive report is built off thousands of survey responses from job seekers and employers across Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, looking into the latest workplace, hiring, and job seeker trends. If you'd like to dive deeper into salaries, benefits, and leading trends across our market or across your market, you can request a copy by scanning the QR code during the live stream or click the link in the comments below. To break down more of what is actually happening in the market, we joined today first by Leanne Allen, an experienced CFO in the property sector. Thank you for joining us today, Leanne.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So I'm going to ask you firstly, what have been your and your team's experiences over the past 12 months?
Well, for me, I'm coming from the private sector. There's sometimes in the property sector, you can have large listed organisations. So I just wanted to put that sort of context into where my comments come from. I'm coming from a private sector, and we've been really lucky, actually. I've had my team in situ for 8 years. So we've got stability, we've got depth, and we've got the ability to almost finish each other's sentences because we've worked together for so long. It's interesting because on the flip side, you say, okay, what's that going to look like? Because we've got to keep up with the trends, and we've got to keep up with AI impending. Yeah. So positives and negatives to having such a strong, robust team. Interestingly, there was a new gentleman who just joined. It was the first time I'd needed to expand the team. And it really actually tripped up my current team because we were so used to speaking in clipped sentences or know exactly what's going on in the business. We had to stop and actually speak in full sentences for this poor new gentleman because he was playing catch up. But so I've been really fortunate, actually, being able to maintain my team.
You must be doing something right as a manager. Absolutely. If you're retaining your people.
Yeah,
that's good. So. And so I'm going to ask you another question, which is off script, but because they've been in the team for quite some time, have you seen any resistance to change?
Obviously, those in more data entry tasks, those accounts payable functions, they start to talk about the nervousness of automation, and obviously every business is going to look to be as efficient as possible. But what the way that I've been able to navigate that is to talk about upskilling and very skilled workers and about redeploying their skill set. So we're going to move into a phase of, instead of doing data entry, there's going to be a greater need, as you've mentioned earlier, for financial analyst and actually analysing the data that is there.
Yeah, so good. And creating a narrative behind what the data means. So
absolutely. Yes.
Sounds good. And so what would you say would be the biggest challenges for your team over the past year?
Well, the biggest challenges for my team was really around change management because there were some business changes that were going on, and having that history and not almost the way it's always been done, but that certain foundation. So when a business is going through that change management, it's very important that that's done delicately but also efficiently. And so that was probably a bit of a challenge for the team, was being able to navigate that change management.
Mm-hmm. And have you seen any salary expectations and pay rise forecasts in the accounting and finance space shift recently?
Like any industry, I think, there is a skills gap. And so there across, obviously with the rising cost of living, there certainly are salary expectations. The property sector is well known for its, sort of remuneration on the higher end. And so, but it doesn't alleviate from the fact that there are expectations. And even through other departments in the property sector, beyond accounting and finance, there certainly is a little bit of that, not demand, but expectation. And perhaps if they don't get their expectation, a bit of shopping around, more so in the other teams. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Yes, and we are seeing that. We're also seeing bonuses being implemented more so this year as of or forecasted this year as opposed to last year, to try and keep the salaries down a little bit, because the expectation is, because with the cost of living, the rise of cost of living, the expectation is that people do want a bigger paycheck at the end of the day. So that's great. So thank you, Leanne, for those insights. I'd like to shift gears slightly now and bring on our second guest today, Chris Yam, Acting General Manager and CFO at St Vincent's de Paul Society, Queensland. St Vincent's de Paul Society, Queensland is a focused community-focused organisation providing practical support to people in need across the state. With over 9,900 volunteers, they offer services like emergency relief, housing support, and financial assistance. So thank you for joining us today, Chris.
Thanks, Bianca. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Have you seen any changes in turnover or retention in the accounting and finance sector recently?
Look, I think if we look probably closer within society or within our team, it's been more so, our team's been very stable, very similar to what Leanne sort of mentioned there with my accountants that I've got. So we've had a very stable team as well. But there's been probably more turnover in the accounts payable sort of area. We've had high turnover there. We've seen that sort of movement there. But what we've found is that with some of those shifts or those movements, you're able to sort of tap into new talent that does come in. But a lot of it too is driven by with those movements, having that work-life balance, I think is quite important, and that's something we've been able to sort of attract a bit of talent around work-life balance, being sort of in the sector that we are. It is slightly different. It is for purpose, and a lot of people do join sort of organizations like ourselves. But I think in general, when we look across the board, I think even in your paper, in your report around work-life balance, flexible working arrangement, I think those are really important things for organizations to provide. And especially, I guess, here in Australia now, and probably very similar in New Zealand and everywhere else, is around the ability to work from home. So I think that's been important, and being able to provide and facilitate some of those sorts of things has been good.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think since COVID, people have structured their lives around work. And in order to put a blanket policy out there to say everybody needs to come back to the office 5 days a week, it's a very, very hard sell. And particularly for new roles, if we're recruiting a role which is 5 days a week in the office, it does narrow the pool down of the available candidates. And it's very hard to give flexibility, then bring it back. But what I'm also finding is that a lot of organisations that, even if they are changing policy on flexibility, some of the line managers, I like to call it quiet flexibility, some of the line managers are quietly still allowing their people to do those flexible hours, but not advertising it widely in the group. But it's great that you guys still offer that.
Absolutely. And I think, as you mentioned, post-COVID, I mean, the world's changed, and especially in our roles in finance, we can do that. We still can do that sort of function, and unless you're in operations, and it's different for our frontline services. Like we've got people that do home,
that's right,
do visitations, people in retail. We also have retail as part of the society. Those are different sorts of roles. But with the ones we've got, you can function, you can do that. You can still be agile, and you can still do your business partnering across the network, because we do cover from all of Queensland, down the south coast to the Gold Coast, all the way through up to far north Queensland, up Townsville that way. And if anything, my experience is that we've found that we've had better coverage or connection with our executive officers across the region.
So good. That is so good. And it's really refreshing to hear that you're still offering that. So Chris, what would you say would be your biggest opportunity for your team over the past year?
Look, I think one of the big things is, it is a lot around technology. I think that's a big shift as well. That's there. What we have sort of seen is around technology. We've looked at in that account space. We've looked at OCR. We've looked at introducing that. We've actually had that now in play for the last 24 months and gaining those efficiencies in those sorts of spaces. And it doesn't mean sort of as we gain those efficiencies, you sort of let go of staff or anything like that. If anything, the society is definitely not about that. It's about, where do we repurpose staff to be, sort of working closely with the organization, with our members, with our people in providing that guidance, support, training, and the things that they do need support with. I think that's really important to sort of mention. The other thing that, we've found is part of that has allowed us to do a lot more business partnering, which I think has been quite welcomed in the organization, because we are quite spread across the network, and we do a lot of different things. I mean, like I said earlier, we do retail, there's housing, there's homelessness, there's all of that stuff. But being able to do the business partnering, I think we've found our stakeholders has really sort of resonated to that. And again, not like other sectors where there's a lot of resource available. I mean, everyone sort of has those challenges, but more so using technology to be able to leverage and work smarter, not harder, so to speak.
Yeah. And I also think with any change, there's opportunities. So write it out and see where the opportunities arise. And similar to what Leanne was saying about, so less data entry, more analytics. So you guys are doing less transactional stuff and more business partnering. So that sounds really aligned. And I do hear a lot of that too when I'm going to meet with other Sydney-based clients. So it's good that everyone, well, not everyone, but everyone on the call today is saying the same message. So that's good. So have you seen salary expectations and pay rise forecasts in the accounting and finance space shift in 2025?
Look, it definitely has. I think we have seen those movements that's come through, especially 2-3 years ago, we had to sort of manage that. I think if anything, there were a lot of shifts in those spaces. I guess in our sort of area, how do we sort of manage that, sort of being a member-led organization? Sort of we have our EAs and what have you that's there, but, we do try and support in different ways. I think there's around supporting, like, especially if you look closer to our staff, supporting their CPA development, those sorts of things, in terms of mentoring and other sort of upskilling that we can provide in that space. But there has been a shift. And look, I think I can't remember what it was, just the other day, it was announced there's another increase that's there with legislation. We've been bombarded with compliance and legislation with all the SACS awards and all that over here in Australia. So anyway, we're just we're just managing through with all of that.
But it's nice that you brought up L&D, learning and development, because that's what candidates do want. And a thing that came out in our report is that, yes, it's really important to have a competitive salary and be paid competitively and be paid on market. But in order to retain your people and keep your people long term, you do need to develop them and create learning opportunities for them. And that's what people want right now. So that's nice that you said that. So I'd like to bring both of you back now to get a little bit more of a broader view and some different perspectives on the market. So I'll start with you first, Leanne. So in our recent 2025 report, 86% of teams plan to stay onshore and 55% offer ongoing training and learning opportunities, like I mentioned before, Chris, including certifications. Are these trends consistent with your organisation, and have you adopted different strategies for workforce development?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you've got such a stable workforce and a stable team, but you want the business to be efficient. So we talk about, working, smarter, not harder. To do that, we need to embrace the efficiencies, embrace AI, embrace technology. So absolutely. Learning and development is a growth area for certainly a stabilised team, and is something that we could do better, and is sort of the plans for the next 12 to 24 months. So we definitely need to, certainly for a stabilised team, need to focus more on that, and focus on making sure that our team has the skill that it wants, and really the business wants as well, because of course we want to be as efficient as possible. And in terms of staying kind of onshore, offshore, really for a business that is project-led, if you're not putting widgets in a box, so not doing something repetitively, I think, perhaps data entry offshore gets a little more difficult. So from a property developer perspective, property developers have large corporate groups, lots of entities, lots of coding, lots of intricacies. That's really hard to standardise, because this project might be different to that project. The project starts and ends over different time periods, so they're not strictly financial years. So there's a number of factors to consider which make automation that little bit more difficult. So it's not like we're going to be able to reduce the staff, numbers, but in 6 months' time. It's just we're not there yet. And I think in similar fashion to what's been sort of said earlier and your report is that AI is there and it's coming, but it perhaps hasn't had the take up that we thought it would in the velocity in which we thought it would. But there's many business reasons why.
Yeah.
So it certainly is. I'm not surprised by the trend data that you've reported. And I think it is going to be a little bit sector specific.
Yes. And Chris, what about you in terms of onshoring or offshoring? What are your thoughts in relation to that, in relation to your team?
Yeah, look, I tend to agree with Leanne around that. It'd be sort of by different sectors. I guess in our type of organization that we are, sort of lay Catholic, charity organization, offshoring is probably not really an option for us as such. It's not in line with the ethos of the organization, and that's something that just probably wouldn't go through. But obviously, different organizations would be different in that space, and you can see where there could be synergies around that in different areas. And you mentioned in those accounts payable area, you could get those synergies there. But with us, it's sort of a little bit different. And I guess how do we manage that is, we look at other things. We do look at some of the technologies around OCR, sort of the like, upskilling the talent that we've got, sort of, repurposing and getting them working closer with the business. I guess that's the way we sort of manage through that particular space.
Sounds good. We have touched on this, but I will just elaborate and just say 45% of accounting teams are prioritising upskilling. Has professional development played a key role in your retention and performance strategy? So I'll open it to the floor if anyone wants to answer.
I'm happy to go first with that if you'd like there. Look, with that, I mean, sort of, I think as we mentioned around CPA, we're very strong on that, supporting the team. And but I think the other important point to sort of mention and sort of say is, supporting them as well, not only whether it's financially through the course or whatever it is, but the time that they have to sort of take away time to go and study and sort of leading into sort of exams and being supportive, having that ability for them to sort of have that space. Because I guess in our sort of functions where, we've got month ends every month that comes up, and unfortunately we can't control when exam dates are coming with CPA, but allowing the staff and being mindful as well, being really mindful, I guess that, they've got exams and managing workload and spaces and expectations in that space. So we'd sort of try that sort of approach. And even when we were recruiting and we were growing, some parts of our accounting team, those were some of the questions that came up with one of the recruits that we had, who's been with us for over 2 years now, and we've seen the person grow. But it is around how does the organization support me or as an individual in this space? And I think the society is very big on that, and you do sort of retain talent, which it's a long game, I suppose. The investment you have in your people gives you the rewards in the end, because you have that stability, as Leanne, you sort of mentioning that in your team. I've got sort of a similar thing. And because disruption does cause money as well. When we have high turnover, it's disruptive, and it is very disruptive. But ensuring, we're recruiting good talent and being supportive for our people as well is important.
Yeah, great. And Leanne, do you have anything to add in relation to that?
Yeah, I do. And I can absolutely relate to Chris's comments. And we have had people go through the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and I've done the mentoring as well. I actually sit on the regional council, so I have the privilege of getting greater exposure to the Institute. And the way that we've managed, because you're right, you can't dictate when exam dates are. So the way that I've structured the team was about having an expert in a role, but then having cross-functional roles as well. So, for example, I'll have my senior finance officer who's sort of leading accounts payable, but there are other people that can do her role as well, so that if she needs to go for whatever reason, exam or anything else, there's coverage for her role. My payroll, head of payroll, there's obviously payroll dates that can't move, and if she needs to take leave for whatever reason, have someone someone else that can do her role as well. So the way that I've tried to mitigate some of those business risks is to have cross purpose roles, and that is through internal really learning and development as opposed to external, and making sure that the team is well skilled across multiple functions.
And there's collaboration in the team, and they're all getting on, and they're doing each other's roles. Or you could even hire a temp. You could do that as well.
Yes, we've done that as well when we've needed to, but of course it comes at a cost. And from Chris's perspective,
and it takes time to upskill them and everything like that. Yeah, I get that. So what do you believe will be the critical skills for both junior and senior financial professionals? What do you believe that they need to succeed in 2025?
Yeah, look, I think, with the junior staff, I think the critical thing is around the technical proficiency. I think in that space, just getting the basics right, the attention to detail, time management, communication skills, that sort of thing. I think that's really important. And I think as staff then grow through the journey and, become more senior members of the team, sort of more around that strategic thinking and financial acumen, sort of being, more advisors and, supporting commercial influencing decision making in that particular space. Being able to start, around storytelling, be able to sort of, really dial it down as well is really important. And I think I can't stress that, as much in our organization, you really got to dial it down because of the diversity of the membership and the stakeholders that we've got through the network that's there. So yeah, I think those are important skills. And as they step up as well, like we've had a bit of shift within our organization recently with the acting role. So, that's created a gap within the team, allowing others to sort of move through the ranks. I've had a staff member who's taken on the group financial controller role, and it's been a great experience. We're sort of all learning on this journey, and I think it's a shared journey, and that allows sort of their growth around leadership and mentorship as well. I think that's been really, really good. So for us, I guess those are the key areas, and as I say, it's really sort of speaking in layman's terms with financials, because it can be quite daunting to a lot of people out there, and being able to get the message clearly across. I mean, it's no point, you could be the smartest person in the room talking technical accounting standards or what have you, and no one understands what you're talking about, so it sort of doesn't get the message across. And I think it's really important, especially with the diverse organization that we're in, and I think in the sector in general, I guess you've got to be able to sort of converse in a very simplistic way to get the message across.
That's great. And what about you, Leanne?
Yeah, my narrative would be very similar. Is around really doing that, analysing the data, and really becoming putting the narrative around what the data is telling you. So for a more junior person, from doing the doing, perhaps the old adage, key what you see, to more so actually having the confidence in a safe environment for them to highlight if something isn't correct or question something in an environment that's supportive of that. So, as opposed to just keying what you're seeing, if you don't think something's right, actually speak up, actually ask the question. And that's where a sort of a more junior role has the ability to become a real asset to the organisation. And from a more senior role, very similar to what Chris was saying, about making the language adaptable for the entire business. So often you'll be in a room presenting to non-accountants, but they still want to understand the financial position, and they obviously need to understand what a decision impact could mean for the business. So really being that linkage between the financial analyst, layman's terms, and then converting it to informing to assist in decision making and what a decision impact could make.
Yeah, I love that. I love the keying what you're seeing. Haven't heard that before, so I'm definitely going to use that.
That's an old one. I'm showing my age.
When I first started recruiting, I used to have, I remember, 30 data entry AP people with the one client, and now those roles are not necessarily there. Those data entry roles are not. They're more elevated. They're more of a conduit between maybe the offshore team or the external team, and dealing with the escalations and being that person that's dealing with the issues, and, particularly in accounts payable, whether it's purchase order numbers or whatever. But it's the keying, what you're seeing is not as much these days. So I'm going to be using that. So thank you. I like it. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. So how is AI transforming accounting and finance, and what specific impacts have you observed over the past 12 months?
I think with AI, we're very much at the start of the journey. And we're sort of just dipping our toes into the water at the moment. That's where we are as an organization. We're starting to have those conversations, which is good. But the technology is quite amazing. I mean, we're starting, like some of the senior team members are starting to use, and not necessarily just with the accounts team, but with leadership team and all that, using things like Copilot and what have you. And it is quite phenomenal what it can do. Even myself included, I've only started using it in the last couple of months, and it's quite powerful. It's such a powerful tool in some of the things. But we visited other industry experts over the last couple of weeks, and some people say, "Oh, Copilot's all right. ChatGPT is more powerful." So who knows? And it's a bit of an uncharted territory.
Exactly.
But like for us, we started with OCR, and I had a meeting the other day with our head of IT, and he was doing a presentation to ourselves around AI, because we're looking at all of that, and policies, frameworks, which is really important, because there's so much stuff that we're being hit with these days as we jump into these meetings, and things can, what's the AI can come in, and it's pretty scary, in the industry where you have chatbots and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But he was sort of explaining how with OCR, it's kind of like visual AI. Because I said, I'm sure those were machine learning back in the day when we sort of put that in, which, it sort of reads the script. But there's all these other different type of AI, and it's just so much to sort of wrap your head around. And I think we're sort of getting there. And I know others are probably ahead of the game in terms of that. But yeah, I think if you can start using the efficiencies, because we sort of went down the conversation around how do we use it specifically in finance. And we were looking at stats, and surprisingly, we were sort of, I think in the top tiers that were there, like the legal profession was way ahead of us, because I think they're using it these days to read contracts and what have you. A lot of the legal firms, and it just goes through and does all that stuff. But it'd be interesting where we can get the efficiencies, and where it's more sort of like a narrative or a conversation with the AI around where can we find cost savings, what can we do with this, and that's where I think the generic power starts coming in. And it's a whole new world, and I think if we don't get on board with some of it, and a lot of it is buzzwords as well. I think at the end of the day, I think that's something we got to be mindful of. At the end of the day, how does it improve us as an organization in terms of, whether you're for profit, if it's to improve your top line growth, your bottom line, or for purpose organizations, is it to improve your ability to generate revenue for mission? I think that's where we got to step back and take stock and not get caught up in this world of this whole
just
AI
doing it because everyone else is. Yeah.
And it looks pretty, especially like dashboards and it's pretty, but where's the value? Where are we going to get the value add in here?
Exactly.
That's the important part.
Exactly. And what about you, Leanne?
Yeah, I was going to say, Chris, the dashboards look pretty, but what do they mean?
Exactly.
For us, we've been AI. I think it has, as I mentioned earlier, hasn't taken off at the velocity in which we thought it would, because there's so much out there, and it's about organisations probably working out what's best for them and putting their policy framework in place. We've been utilising it more from an executive level, so reading those legal documents, analysing a set of financials, analysing contracts. We've been using it for meeting minutes and automating agendas. So more of what I would call business administration we've been using it. Also teaching ourselves, right? So a bit like, everyone's just learning on the job kind of thing. And so that's, I think, holistically, everyone can do better at, educating themselves, but everyone's kind of learning on the job, right? But as a finance specific, probably haven't embraced it as much as we could. And it will be industry specific, and it will be what system do you currently have in place and how does that interact with it? And there'll be a number of factors to consider. So I think from a finance perspective, haven't embraced it as much as more from a business administration perspective.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. We use it. We use it mostly on the candidate lifecycle stage. So updating candidates' details, getting in contact with candidates. So it is really valuable, but it needs to be tailored to the organisation and to the various teams that are actually using it. And that analysis takes time to work out what you actually want to achieve and whether, as Chris said, whether it's going to generate more revenue. You wouldn't just do it because you would do it because it would generate more revenue out the other side or make things more efficient. So totally understand that. And so beyond AI, what other key trends do you expect will continue to make an impact by 2030?
I think finance teams and businesses in general have to really consider the additional burden of compliance. So it doesn't matter what sector you're in. I think, Chris would have his own in different sectors. There are new legislation coming in for aged care sectors, compliance across the board, and the heavier oversight of increased regulatory scrutiny is going to really impact. Now, from a business perspective, not more compliance, right? But from a society perspective, well, don't we want everything in order, and don't we want organisations to, ensure that they are doing the correct thing? So it's finding that balance. But I know from a business perspective, at the moment, there's just more compliance and more compliance and more compliance coming from a range of locations, a range of statutory requirements, regardless of your sector. It would be relevant to your sector. So I think that is going to be, at least for the next 2 years, a real focus as businesses reset themselves. One, for how their teams are now being financial analysts as opposed to data entry. And two, how they're repurposing their teams to deal with compliance. And all of a sudden, everybody's a compliance officer. So that navigation is going to be a real focus, I would imagine, for 2 years.
Yeah.
And Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, look, I absolutely agree with you there, Leanne. I think we're in the same boat, no different here. And absolutely compliance. There's all these legislative requirements that's coming through, safeguarding, and all these others that is coming through. There's so much, and it adds cost. It does add cost pressures to your budget that you've got to manage in the next years out. So in terms of that, those are the pressures we sort of see here. Being in the retail sector, we've got, there's 150 stores here in Queensland. I mean, and with that, there's also cost pressures as well in that particular space. You've got some of the big end of town, commercial ones, like Rivers and all that. They've all gone sort of belly up over there. So we currently are in a challenging spot ourselves, and the competition against online as well. You got that online and being selling second-hand goods. That's people put things on marketplace. So there's all those challenges that you got to manage and deal with sort of going forward, and also property cost pressures as well. Here in Australia, we used to have Australian Catholic Church insurances, which they went belly up. So we used to sort of use them, but unfortunately they couldn't sort of survive. But then it's the alignment of cost. So it is that high increase of cost, which is part of the challenge, and trying to maintain that top line growth as well. And at the end of the day, it's not all about funds, because for us, it's very much doing that to achieve mission, but it's also then the pressures and demands with cost of living. So again, that comes back to organizations like St. Vincent de Paul or Salvation Army or whoever it is around needing assistance. So it's all those sort of pressures that we sort of foresee. But it's a hard market, but we sort of got to work smart in what we do and invest in the right areas to sort of achieve what we need to do.
Well, thank you. A big thank you to both of you for your time today and for giving us some incredible insights into the market. If anyone is watching today and wanting to reach out and get in contact with Leanne or Chris, you can visit the comments for all the information below. Thank you once again.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Just a reminder that all the insights shared today are based off our 2025 Market and Salary Trends Report. If you'd like to dive deeper into salaries, benefits, and workplace trends across our market, you can request a copy by scanning a QR code on the screen now or clicking the link in the comments below. Lastly, whether you're looking to grow a career or build your team with the right talent, the People to People Group can help. An award-winning recruitment agency, we operate across Australia and the United Kingdom with specialist team in every major market. Across the ditch in New Zealand, we're proudly have been recruiting for over 23 years through Frog Recruitment with offices in Auckland and Wellington, and in South Australia, Edge Recruitment and Adelaide, leading specialists in property, real estate and general admin roles. Contact details are on the screen now, or see the links in the comments to reach out to one of our team members today. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us for our special Accounting and Finance Market Update. See you next time. Bye.